my trip up north several years ago. I went up with my girlfriend to more of a wild area. We've always been outdoor people, so it was a typical thing for us to do. We drove up on a Friday, and on Saturday we walked around on the hiking trails. We stayed in our truck because it was pretty nice and it had just enough space for us. We made some food and then went for another walk that night. Our truck was at a park that was pretty quiet. It was mainly just a kind of starting point for the trails in the area. There were a good 3 or 4 trails, but they were pretty quiet on this day. Nobody else was there, and at about 10 p.m., we went out for a short walk during the night. It was much cooler and less hot, and things had a different look at night. We walked down the trail for about 5 minutes, and came up on an area that went downhill a little bit, and then went next to the river. It was a nice area, and we stopped to look at the water for a little while. As we were starting to go back up the hill towards the path, we heard a noise come from about 100 feet to our left near the water, and then heard a splashing sound in the water. We looked over in the direction, but didn't see anything. Then we moved down a little to get a better view. When we did, we saw a large brown creature coming around from behind a tree. It was about 7 feet tall and looked like a really furry man. My girlfriend and I both got a look at it for about 10 seconds, and I can tell you that 100% it was not a bear. We stood there frozen and unable to say anything. The creature didn't seem to notice us, and it stepped slightly in the water before walking out and going up the hill. It was less than 100 feet away, when after it walked away, I was finally able to speak. I said in a shaky voice, "Did you see that?" My girlfriend asked me what on earth it was. We decided the best thing to do was to go back. We both carefully walked up, looking all around at it. We both carefully walked back, looking all around us constantly, and finally made it back to the truck. The walk back took only about 5 minutes, but it felt much longer. We got back and decided to drive to another place to spend the night. As we drove, we talked about what we could have seen. We know it wasn't a bear, and it was so tall that I don't think it was a man. This story was in fact the scaredest I've ever been in my life. I'm 29 now, but this took place back when I was 15. I was with my family staying up in a cabin. It was about 3 hours north of where we lived. It was a pretty quiet area, and we went up there to get away from things. We did the typical things when we were up there. We liked to hunt and fish and do things like that. It was my parents and my brother and I, along with my aunt, uncle, and cousin. The cabin was not all that big, but we did have enough space for all of us. It had 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen area. The first day that we were there, it was very normal. We did some fishing, and my dad and uncle did some hunting. I played some badminton with my brother and cousin in the yard. That night, we grilled some burgers, and then went in for the night. We didn't have a whole lot of furniture in the cabin, but we did have a TV. We were all watching a movie when we started to hear some noises from outside. For the most part, we just ignored it, because it wasn't really that loud or anything, but it was the sound of trees being moved kind of out in our woods. It kind of went away, but then when the movie was done and we were all getting ready for bed, we heard it once again. The cabin had some trees on most sides of it, except for the front and west sides. The noises were once again the sound of trees being moved around, but it was much louder this time and also closer. From the sounds of things, it had to be either a very large animal or a human. I decided to stick my head out of one of the windows and look. From the angle that I was at, I didn't really see anything because of the trees in the way. But after looking for about a minute, I did see a tree move. The branches shook, but I didn't see anything. I kept looking, and then finally, I saw it. It appeared to be a man walking. But then when I looked closer, I noticed it was not a man, because there was fur completely covering his whole body. I whispered at my cousin who was nearby to come and look. He came and looked as well. The creature was roughly 50 feet away, walking slowly in and out of trees, and didn't seem to notice us. Pretty soon more of my family began to look out the window. We were all really surprised by it. Then it started to walk towards us. Judging by the size of it, it was not human at all. It was extremely large. Something about it just really gave me the creeps, and I had seen many other animals well up at the cabin. We quickly got away from the window as it came close. Then we heard a very loud thud against the house and the sound of tree branches snapping. My dad went to get his gun, but whatever was out there seemed to then walk away. My dad and uncle both decided to walk around the property and see, but when they got out there, it was gone. This was before everyone had smartphones as well, so nobody was able to take a photo of it. That night I was pretty scared that whatever it was would come back, and I didn't really get much sleep at all. The next day we went out and looked, and we saw that there was a lot of broken branches and a noticeable mark in the side of the cabin in the wood. I don't know of any human that could have done that. We stayed there for another night as well, but nothing happened. To this day, I still think about that night all the time. I just want to start out this story by saying I was never a believer in Bigfoot, and I've always been skeptical. I still am to this day, but my story really makes me wonder. About 5 years ago, I was on a hike in the Pacific Northwest. I've been going to many different locations up there for years and seeing all the great wildlife that's in that area. I've seen many amazing animals in my time there, but none as strange as the one that I saw on this particular day. I was in one of the more secluded areas I had ever hiked in. It took me a long time to get there, and once I was there, I didn't see any other people in the area at all that day. It was pretty much just me. I didn't worry about it though, because I had lots of experience. I started out in a wooded area and walked in it for about an hour before finally it cleared a little bit and became more of an area with hills as well as trees. I got up on top of a hill and started to walk down it, but as I did, I noticed something. I stopped in my place and looked. When I was on top of the hill, I had a pretty good view of everything in front of me and saw a brown creature walking. I immediately assumed that it was a bear. I knew bears could be very dangerous, so I stayed on the hill and watched it, hoping for it to walk away. But as I watched it, I saw that the way it was moving was not like a typical bear. The way it walked was always on 2 feet instead of 4, and it almost seemed to glide as it moved. I took up my binoculars and looked closer. When I saw the animal's head, it didn't really seem to have a face of a bear at all, or the body. It seemed to be skinnier in the face and lacking a long nose that a bear has. It seemed to have more human characteristics. The more I looked at it, the more I started to get really creeped out. I watched the animal walk for a good 30 seconds until it was out of sight. After it walked away, it was enough to make me want to turn back and go the other way. I walked back and couldn't stop thinking about it. At times, it sounded like I heard noises behind me. After a long time, I was finally able to make it back. I didn't believe in Bigfoot or anything like that, but I just don't know how to explain what I had seen. I knew if I told people, they likely wouldn't believe me, so to this day, I've only told a small number of people.